Hey there, it's Karen Laos here, and today we're talking about 3 credibility killers in your language. This has become very top of mind for me, and in particular, this happened recently when I was in Minnesota visiting because I was on a gig with Hormel Foods. I do a fair amount of work there, and my brother also happens to live there, and you may know that I'm originally from there. So, irrelevant facts and details here, but to give you some context, I was there and I was at a yoga studio. 2 times this happened during the week. The first time, I'm about to get on my mat. It's right before class, and we're all getting quieted down. The rustle and bustle of people putting out their mats has diminished. And the woman says, with really gentle and yet great authority, "All right, everybody, we're going to start in plank position, if that's okay." And I thought, wait, what? So again, hear me when I say she had this great authority. We're going to start in the plank position. And then she said, "Is that okay?" Or "if that's okay." And I thought, oh my goodness, what a brain switch. When you have somebody showing their authority and then saying, "Is that okay?" It completely switches up how you view that person. And this is why I'm calling this episode these different credibility killers, because when we say things like, "Is that okay? Does that make sense?" And we'll dive into these a little bit more. It makes it look like we're not sure of ourselves. And obviously, that is the exact opposite of credibility and authority. And of course, we all want to be seen as credible and authoritative leaders and people, obviously, kind as well. But that's the first thing that happened. Then a couple days later, I'm at the exact same yoga studio, different person, and she says to me, she said it with a real authority. So right before I was getting there, she's checking me in and she says, "I need to charge you for mats and towels, or we charge for mats and towels, if that's okay." She said it again. That's the same person, but my first thought was, well, it's not okay. I don't really want to be paying for a mat and a towel if you're willing to give it to me. And it was so interesting because we had a whole conversation about it after class. And I just broached the subject with her and she said, it's because I don't want to have to charge people, but we have to charge people." So that was such a good example of how that "is that okay" came out as a lack of confidence. Sometimes it comes out as a habit only. We've heard it many times before. We've done it many times before. We've had other people model saying those phrases to us, and that's why we tend to say them. But another reason could truly be it's because we lack confidence in what we're saying. So we're trying to come at it with strength and then we don't. Another way that we do this is having an idea and saying something like, "This idea is going to be a great thing for the company, I think." So when we make a statement of authority and then we say "I think," it diminishes it. Same idea as "is that okay?" Let's talk about a few more of these. So if we go with now talking more about the phrases, the demeaning or diminishing or disempowering language. Does that make sense? I mentioned that already. Now, this isn't so much demeaning, but in general, if we're using this as a habit, after a while, it can make it look like we don't think we make sense if we have to ask all the time to check for understanding and get permission from the person that we're talking to or in an audience. Now, I will say there is a time and a place for this when you are checking for understanding every once in a while in a one on one situation. I would not use this in a group setting. I would use this only in one on one. When you use it in a group setting, it can cause other people over time to wonder, does she think she makes sense, or why is she questioning herself? A better thing to say instead of "does that make sense" is "what's making sense here? What's resonating for you?" Or "based on everything you've heard thus far, what is standing out?" Or "what is your biggest takeaway right now?" Or What is the most valuable thing that you've gotten out of our conversation so far? Those are much better questions to ask because they're going to give you some meat rather than just an yes or no. When you say, does that make sense? Most of us don't want to look stupid. I would venture to say pretty much everybody does not want to look stupid. And so no people typically in a group setting, unless they have a super strong confidence and character structure within themselves, they're probably going to agree, even if it doesn't make sense. So it's not a very useful question. Now, here's another one. I'm probably not as good as you, but don't out yourself. Maybe truthfully, you're not as good as that person as far as expertise, or you're not as good at that skill as they are. Maybe they're better at math than you, but you don't need to say that out loud. That just outs you and it draws attention to something that doesn't need to be brought, that doesn't need attention brought to it. Keep in mind that people's energy and focus will go where you direct it, and especially yourself. The negative things that we say to ourselves and as well the positive, those things all affect us. So be careful about saying that. I wouldn't say it at all. I'm probably not as good as you. Don't out yourself. Okay, here's another one. We talked about maybe somebody is great at math, but let's say you say I'm terrible at math, or I'm I have to catch myself saying I'm not a planner. I plan things all the time. I am a planner. Now, I don't love planning, but it doesn't mean that I have to say that out loud. So being careful of things like that, or oh, I'm horrible at technology, or oh, I have to get the young person in here to don't talk like that. That's another thing that or this is a real pet peeve of mine personally. When people that are in my age group say things, I mean, I guess it could be any age group, but when we say things like, well, we're all getting older, or wow, it sucks to get old, or anything referencing their age related to whether it's a physical ability or energy level, I find that self talk terrible and even out talk. Maybe it's not self talk, but it's out of your mouth talk. But all of those things contribute to then things conspiring, but conspiring is maybe not the right word. But basically, when we say things out loud, they tend to move us in that direction. So we don't want to put that energy out there. Okay. Another one is I'm sorry to bother you is one that's very personal for me because my mom used to say it all the time. As a little kid, I remember she would be calling for anything related to church stuff that she was a volunteer and she was also head of volunteers, and so she was always calling people to volunteer. And having that be the first thing out of her mouth, notice how that sets you up. If I say, "Oh, I'm so sorry to bother you," it sounds like you're asking, basically, you're sounding like you don't have value and you don't have worth. And you have a ton of value and you have a ton of worth. You don't need to be saying those things. So being careful about that, or something like, I hate to be a bother. That again, it sounds like you are putting yourself down. So we want to avoid those things. How about this one? I'm no expert, but I've heard some of the most incredible experts make this statement. And again, all it does is set things up as if you're not. And then let's just say you accidentally don't sound as articulate as you'd like, or maybe you don't do the thing as well as you had hoped. Then people will go, oh, you're right. She's no expert. It sets us up again for your audience to think that that might be true. Or how about this one? I'll try to cover this quickly because we feel like we don't want to take up space. We are acting as if we don't deserve to be in the room. And that is absolutely also untrue. So, of course, it's important to be succinct and get to the point. That's also very much connected to credibility. But you definitely don't need to say, I'll try to cover this quickly and then talk as fast as possible. Use the time that you need to deliver whatever it is that you need to deliver. And remember that you deserve to be in that room. Another one is you probably already know this, but once again, you're acting as if, well, I'm just this little thing here in the background that doesn't know any better. And that is not a way to set yourself up as an authority and a credible force, because you are a credible force. Another one I hear a lot, particularly from women, is saying something to the tune of either, "Oh, I'm rambling. Oh, I'm sorry I'm rambling," or "Those are my rambling thoughts. Just me rambling." Once again, it takes away from the value that you have. So be careful about all of these. I will say one more related to the language here in the sentence structure is, how can I follow that? Oh, how can I follow that? Oh my goodness. I wish that I hadn't gone last because there's no way I can follow that. And once again, it makes it look like, well, yeah, this person is probably not going to be very good, or it just makes it uncomfortable. Sometimes it's awkward. People generally tend to laugh. Like, I remember being at an event with about 200 people, and the woman on stage was so good. I knew she was good because I had seen her before, but right as she was walking on stage, she said something like, "Well, I know that I'm the last thing between this event and your next martini," or something like that. And I thought, no, don't say that right up front. You're so good. And now all people are thinking about is that drink or that cocktail or that food at the happy hour. So you don't want to distract people. It's hard enough to get up there for most of us and speak and keep an audience's attention and be engaging and memorable and sticky in your messaging, let alone making like basically sabotaging ourselves. So be careful about all of these things that can get in the way. Many women hold back due to self-doubt, people pleasing, not wanting to rock the boat, fear of being judged, not wanting to say anything that would make them unpopular. There's so many different reasons why we hold back, and this is a problem. I did it far too long, and I don't want anybody to be held back from being their true and authentic self because we're missing opportunities and we leave money on the table. And if you relate to any of this, I would love to talk to you to see if it's a fit for you to join the Powerhouse. It is my mastermind community that helps women get promoted, move to that next level in their career in general, lead with authority, get better at public speaking, as well as negotiating. It all depends what you're trying to do, but it's ultimately about how to ditch that doubt and catapult your career with an incredibly supportive group of women, as well as individual coaching. If that even sounds remotely interesting, I would love to talk to you more about it and see if the Powerhouse is right for you. You can jump into the show notes and you'll see a link there where you can schedule a clarity call with me to see if it makes sense. Those were the demeaning or disempowering sentences or language, or sentence structure, I should say. Let's talk about minimizing words. So this truly is any word or form of a word that takes away what you're going to say. So for example, let's say I said to you, "I just want to share a little tip with you." And oftentimes we do it with a little shoulder shrug, like we make ourselves smaller. Sometimes we even say it in a voice where we go, "I just want to share a little tip with you," where it almost sounds like a little girl, like, "I just want to share, just little old me." And notice if I take out the words just and little, it sounds powerful. "I want to share a tip with you." Or eliminate "I want to share" and share the tip. You don't even have to qualify it and say what's coming. Share the tip and be careful about things. I know we touched on this already, but things like "I believe" and "I think." Those are also words that tend to get in the way, especially after we say something. It could also be, so if we go with this example of "I want to share a tip with you," it could be that you say, "My tip is," or "My recommend," let's leave it in something different. Specifically, "My recommendation is that we put $10,000 toward this budget thing." And that sounds great. But what if after that I say, "I think this is a good idea." Or in advance of that, I say, "I think my recommendation is," and notice even in my language, I sound hesitant. So that's another thing. We want to make sure in our delivery that we come across with power and strength in our voices. Now, Just and little are the ones we've talked about primarily. I think, I believe, be careful about using those in a way that takes away from your message. And here's the true test. You especially can check this in email. If you eliminate those words, does the meaning stay intact? And most of the time it will with those words. Now, I recognize that the word just and little are in the English language for a reason. Just is when it's time sensitive. I just saw so and so across the street. That's when I would use it. Or little obviously has a lot of different uses, but be careful about using it in a way that diminishes what you're saying. Two other ones that I want to address related to words that we use are kinda and sorta. I kinda have this idea. I sort of want to share something. I sort of think this would be a good idea. Maybe is another one that can sound like we doubt ourselves. Again, these are words, if you take them out and go, huh, do I need these? You might find that you don't need them at all. And most importantly, you come across with a lot more strength and power and credibility in the way that you're speaking. So the key is to test those things out. Now, let's talk about the third one here is the non words, such as and ah. And I would even put so and in there, even though I know those are technically words. When we have that one syllable thing that gets in the way instead of what? Pausing. You want to make sure that you are pausing to eliminate, or excuse me, you want to make sure that you're pausing. Well, yeah, to eliminate the filler words. So for example, instead of so and then sometimes we combine them and so and any of that halting is a real deal breaker related to how you come across in your speech, related to your authority. So maybe deal breaker is a strong word. Every once in a while, I also don't want to be so legalistic about this that you feel like I'm saying you have to be perfect. I'm talking about with all of this, I'm talking about anything that's excessive and happens a lot. So the only way you're going to truly know is to get feedback through two lenses. One is recording yourself and see and hear how you sound. And then number two, getting feedback from people around you. So be careful about those excessive ums, ahs, so's, and then I'll just throw in there too. Here's me just. I'll just throw in there, you know, you know what I mean? Those any of these words, folks, and sentences can truly get in our way. Now, I know it's a lot easier said than done. Then, I mean, obviously, I could tell you, hey, eliminate them. That's all you need to do. It is not that easy, and I understand that. So, this is why, if we go back to, well, what do you do about it? You record yourself and you practice and you record, you practice, you record. You have as many opportunities as possible to record yourself and to get feedback from people. For example, your family, your kids, if you have them, get everybody enrolled to help you with eliminating things because most of the time, our habits are ingrained that they show up in other places besides our higher stakes situations. So, for example, I'll give you a real example with somebody I was coaching years ago. The company hired me to help her come across with more authority. And they said one of her problems was the amount of filler words, particularly ums, that she used. So I was coaching her, and I remember coaching her on the filler words. And she said, well, obviously this was a defense mechanism for her. She goes, well, I only do that with you. And I said, oh, okay. Well, that's really interesting to know. I mean, I'm not going to judge her for that if that's what she thinks. So what I suggested is that she record herself in other situations besides talking to me. And of course her boss said, oh my gosh, she always does it. That's why we hired you. And so you never know when those things come out. Most of the time, if we have a habit in one place, it's going to come out in other places, but you'll never know until you ask people to help you. So that's a really thing. I mean, a really good way to do it. Another thing Reminds me of a story of a guy who I was coaching, and we watched his video. And he said, right before I pressed play to watch the video of him presenting, he said, I can already tell you that I do lots of ums and ahs. And he said, I'm even thinking about it and even tally marking it as I'm talking. And I said, well, no wonder you're doing it so much. You're sabotaging yourself. So I said, what if you tried an affirmation and you said something like, I am a person who perfectly pauses? And he tried that and he said it helped him. Now, that's not going to help everybody. But what I want to do here is provide some options that are really tangible to help you to make these shifts. Another thing to keep in mind is that in the spoken word, we forget that punctuation exists. It's the weirdest thing. But when you write an email, you wouldn't think twice about putting in a comma and a period and exclamation point where it's appropriate. And yet, a lot of times in our speech, we forget that punctuation exists and it becomes what we say is a run-on sentence as opposed to pausing, putting that period there, and then moving to the next sentence. So keep that in mind, especially. A lot of times we don't ever land in our sentences. And you will start noticing this if you really become a student of communication. You'll start noticing in introductions that most of the time people have one big run on sentence. And for me, it's the difference between, hi, I'm Karen Laos, and I'm originally from Minneapolis, and I'm a keynote speaker, live in San Francisco now. It's just a drone of information versus, hi, I'm Karen Laos. I'm originally from Minneapolis, but now I live in San Francisco. I'm a keynote speaker specifically for women, da 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 da. Da. You can hear how different that is. So I know we've covered a lot today. And again, as a reminder, this is about 3 credibility killers in your language, specifically avoiding the words, the diminishing or disempowering language or demeaning language. And then there are the words that we use that minimize our speech. And then thirdly, the ums and ahs that get in the way. So pause instead. By the way, if you are interested in delving deeper into this and you want to explore what it might look like to work with me, I host the Powerhouse, which is a group mastermind as well as individual group, or excuse me, as well as an individual group. What am I saying? Group and individual coaching program, but primarily it's a mastermind with incredible women that are all high level, high achieving, and yet still struggle with confidence, particularly in how we communicate and things that we often don't even realize that we're doing because we want to get a raise or we want to negotiate better, or we want to speak in public better. There's a lot of different things, or simply asking for what you want. So that is something, if you're interested in learning more about, I would love to chat with you, and you can check out the links in the show notes. So looking forward to next week. Again, this is Karen signing off. If you loved today's episode, please subscribe and leave a review. It helps other people find the podcast faster, and it certainly helps me. Remember, you too can stand out with unshakable confidence.